Okay, we're probably going to go ahead and get started. It's about 6:32 on my computer anyway, and I know it's a beautiful evening. Everybody wants to get out and enjoy the rest of it. If a few more people end up joining us, I'll try to get them into the meeting as quickly as possible. But thanks for everybody for coming out. So this meeting this evening is to talk about the future of Heatherway in East St. John. And I'm going to go through a few slides here. But the most important part of this evening is a discussion, really to get some feedback from the community on what the best future for that street should be going forward. So up on the screen right now is a bit of an agenda with hopefully everybody's okay, we're going to follow. So first of all, my name is Tim O'Reilly. I'm the traffic engineer for the City of St. John. I'm also the director for Transportation and Public Works for the city. So I'll be hosting this meeting, but again, hopefully it's going to be a very interactive discussion as well. I know a few names on the call here for sure, but hopefully I'll get a chance to hear from everybody and meet you as part of this call. Just a quick notice that this meeting is being recorded. We are planning to have this taped version of the meeting on the city website following this meeting to give a chance for anybody who wasn't able to attend to watch it. So it will be posted. Also mentioned as well, I think we have one reporter, I believe. I know there's a couple of reporters that were interested in coming on the call, and it is open to everybody. And I do believe we have at least one reporter on, so just for awareness there. Just in terms of this meeting, of course, it's virtual. Can't wait for the time. I'm sure you all can't wait for the time where we can get back to in-person meetings. We're almost there, probably another month to go. But certainly we're trying to be extra cautious. So this obviously is a virtual meeting. We did a similar one actually about 3 or 4 weeks ago for another street, and it was quite effective actually. Worked pretty well. So what we're going to do, and I see everybody's muted, which is great. You have your ability to turn your camera on too. You're certainly welcome to do that. Just a couple of quick instructions. This is using Microsoft Teams. So if you see at the top right-hand corner of your screen, there's obviously the leave button. Hopefully we'll be pressing that part way through. Stay on for the whole time. And then closely to the left of that leave button, you'll see a microphone. It should be indicated as muted right now, but you can unmute yourself if you do want to speak. So certainly when it comes time for your time to speak, I'll ask you to unmute yourself. But just to try to control the feedback and stuff, we'll try to get 1, maybe 2 people unmuted at the same time. And then to the left of that is a picture of a camera. So you do have the ability to show yourself, and you certainly can, either for the whole presentation or when you're speaking as well. It's certainly up to you. So again, same idea. You click that camera that allows everybody to see you, and then you click it again, and it has the line through it, and your camera is not being shown to everybody. So it's completely up to you if you want to do that or not. Just moving a bit more to the left on that, again, top right-hand screen, you'll see a little bit of a hand and a happy face there. So if you do want to speak during the presentation, it's going to be a pretty small crowd. Expect, I think, up to about 10 people. So certainly if you wanted to pipe in at some point and say something, you certainly can. We'll try to do that. But certainly the preferred way is if you have something to say, you just hover over that hand and face, and you'll see over on the right-hand side a hand. And so certainly press that, and I'll watch for those hands go up during the meeting, and I'll call on people as they do want to speak. As I mentioned, we'll be going through I'm doing a bit of a presentation for you. So probably hold most of the comments after that, but certainly at that point after, raise your hands, and I'll try to do it in order as people raise them for their opportunity to ask questions or to provide comments. So again, as I did mention, I'll go through a bit of a presentation with context and options for Heatherway. Again, we'll open it up to a roundtable discussion. We'll see, perhaps at the end, we'll come up with a bit of a consensus if possible on maybe the approach for Heatherway going forward. And then I'll end the call with an opportunity to provide feedback. So certainly this meeting is your opportunity, or one opportunity, to provide feedback. Obviously, it's quite a bit interactive. but certainly we'll provide a period of time after the meeting where people can submit their comments in written format in the form of an email. And as I mentioned, I'll provide those details towards the end of the meeting. So just to jump into it then, so this is a bit of a couple of philosophical questions, I guess is the best way to put it. But as we start off this discussion this evening, I guess I'll ask you to think of a couple of questions that you want to ask yourselves and we want to ask ourselves as we have this discussion. So the first one is, what is it that we want Heatherway to be and do for the community going forward? You know, some sub questions there. You know, is the will there to slow vehicle speeds compared to what it is now? Is there intent or wish to have more space for cyclists dedicated? You know, any opportunities for spaces either crossing the street for pedestrians or improvements along the street itself? Of course, can't forget about motorists. So motorists use Heatherway. So is there a will there to provide a high level of standard for motorists? And then another thing to keep in mind is whether there's opportunities to reduce infrastructure costs on a street like this, and we'll get into that a bit later. And of course, once you answer all those questions and those sub questions, the main question, I guess, number two is ultimately what is a feasible option for Heatherway to allow it to be what it needs to be for the community. So really the intent, I guess, is to think about those questions as we go through. I go through the presentation, but obviously as we start to talk about your input and what you want to see Heatherway to be, is to kind of think of it in that frame of mind. So what brings us here together this evening? So again, I guess a half apology and both a thank you as well to coming out on an evening like this. It's obviously the day before Canada Day. So I thank everybody for coming out on this evening, which is also somewhat of a nice evening, although we have a bit of showers here and there. But we are coming together this evening and at this time for a few different reasons. So first of all, we had a plan in place to repave Heatherway in 2021. That was planned early on. We did have Common Council a couple of months ago when that plan was presented to them, requested a rethink of the street before we repave. So obviously paving costs money, so they suggested before we go ahead and pave the street as it currently is, let's just have a rethink of it and make sure it meets the purpose of the community. So that's why we're here as well. Some other reasons, I guess, why we're having a discussion tonight. There is some real estate, obviously, to work with. I'll get into the cross sections a bit of what Heatherway is now, but it is quite a wide street. Has four vehicle lanes, and along the center of it, it alternates between a fifth center lane as well as a central median or boulevard. This whole idea of rethinking St. John streets is new or becoming new over the last number of years. So obviously a growing interest in active transportation within the community and roadway safety generally for all roadway users. We have our Minnesota plan, Plan SJ, which again had a rethink completely on our community overall in terms of how it's going to grow over time, but also getting into the transportation system. And we also have a new transportation plan for the city. We're just actually finalizing the third and final phase of that plan in 2021. And again, as part of that new transportation plan, we are having a rethink in terms of how and what types of modes of transportation are going to be served by that street system. We also had a 2009 traffic calming plan that was in place, which was partially adopted. So just getting into that a bit more. So it was about 2008, in the fall of 2008, we did end up having a death on Heatherway. It was a pedestrian that was struck by a vehicle. That vehicle was traveling about twice the speed limit for Heatherway. I actually became the traffic engineer for the city in 2008 earlier that year, and certainly it was a sad day for the community, and obviously hit home quite a bit for me as well in terms of being in the position I'm in, because luckily in St. John we don't have a lot of deaths on our roadways, and certainly that was a shocking one. So that did happen back in 2008. As a result of that death, we developed a traffic calming plan for Heatherway. That plan, worked very closely with our police force, the traffic sergeant at the time, Sergeant LaFrance, We did quite a bit of consultations with the community, had a community meeting out in the Heatherway area. I forget the exact location. It might have been at MBCC perhaps. But we had some consultations with the community as to what the future should hold for Heatherway. We did end up installing a couple of speed humps along the southbound 2 lanes of Heatherway. And we also did a speed limit reduction from 60 kilometers an hour down to 50 kilometers an hour as part of that traffic calming plan. We also discussed at the time the potential to actually do a road diet. So again, this is a good 12 years or so ago for Heatherway by completely closing down one side to vehicular traffic. That, of course, was never implemented and has not been implemented to date. All that being said, certainly that experience, again, shortly after the death in 2008, working with the community, developing a plan for Heatherway and the reasons for it being developed, all went into, contributed significantly towards our traffic calming policy, which was actually adopted in 2012. In fact, you see on the right-hand side of the slide, the same, it's the front page of that policy, and there's actually the image that's on that policy front page is actually one of the speed humps that we installed back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010 on Heatherway. So certainly early implementation of traffic calming within St. John on Heatherway. I'm just going to run through a couple of slides. I'm sure most of you've been on Heatherway before out in East St. John. It obviously goes from Hickey Road to Grandview Avenue, just off of Loch Lomond Road. But I'm going to go through a couple of slides just to show what it currently is and what it looks like. So this is the northern end of Heatherway that connects on to Hickey Road. Again, you'll notice it's a 4 or 5 lane cross section roadway. Again, alternates in the center between either the median or the 5th turning lane. And on either side of those 4 lanes of traffic or 5 lanes of traffic, there's a median on either side, as well as a sidewalk for pedestrians on both sides. You'll see a red square on this particular slide. That's the location of one of the 2 speed humps we actually installed and is still there on that southbound direction of Heatherway. So just continuing in the southbound direction, again, the cross section stays similar along Heatherway, and again, you'll notice as well, especially towards this northern end. Again, it's probably no surprise to people on the call. A couple of things of note. So a lot of the properties back onto Heatherway, but you also notice that no driveways come onto Heatherway either. So Heatherway in its design is a true collector street in that it collects from more neighborhood style streets that have driveways off of that, but Heatherway itself actually doesn't have any driveways. It just connects other roads to Heatherway. So keeping going along, and that's the other, that red square is the second speed hump in that southbound direction, and again, it's still there. So keeping along, again, the same cross section as we go past Boyaner. And then it extends all the way to the southern end. It connects on the Grandview Avenue. So you'll notice, obviously, in this slide, this southern end of Heatherway is not developed. The western side, I guess, so down on the page, you'll see a bit of a driveway there. This is a couple of years old, this particular image, but that is an approved development that's starting. But I'll get on the eastern side, on the top side of the page, is pretty wide open in terms of not being developed at all towards the southern end of Heatherway. So that's, again, the infrastructure kind of in a nutshell. As I mentioned, we actually, University Avenue and Heatherway are quite similar streets. They're both very similar cross sections. We did have a similar meeting about University Avenue a few weeks ago, might be actually a month or two now. If anybody participated in that meeting on University Avenue, you'll notice a bit of a difference as we're talking on Heatherway. So when we talk about University Avenue, I guess some stars aligned on University Avenue. We had a bike route that was on that street already, had a Campus Harbor Connection bike route. It's indicated as a biking route within Move SJ. We also had a lot of concerns about pedestrian crossing safety, as well as congestion issues towards the Millage Avenue end. So we had a lot of feedback in advance of that meeting with University Avenue. So going into that meeting, we had, I guess, somewhat of a design that we had in mind. Certainly adjusted based on the feedback we received, but we had quite a defined plan in place for University Avenue. For Heatherway, it's you'll see it's quite a bit different. We don't really have a preconceived notion as to what the design should be for Heatherway. So as you go through this presentation, and if you were involved in University Avenue, and you'll notice a bit of a difference in terms of the style. Again, this particular presentation is more of an all options approach, and again, still significantly questioning what that future should be for Heatherway. As I mentioned, we did do traffic calming on Heatherway. Again, the speed limit reduction as well as the 2 speed humps. So we actually did both speed and volume counts on Heatherway before and after those traffic calming measures were in place. So back in 2009, when we first started investigating the traffic calming, we did a speed survey. And again, before those measures were in place, again, we had speeds between 53 and average speeds, I should say, between 53 and 58 kilometers an hour, depending on which side of the street people were driving on. So still, the average speeds were less than 60 kilometers an hour. But again, these are averages, so there were definitely vehicles traveling higher than the speed limit. So fast forward to just in the past few months, we actually did a follow-up speed survey that lasted from about November of 2020 till I think it was May of this year. We just finished it a couple of months ago, and so again, this is post the speed humps, post the 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit that was posted on Heatherway, and you see up on the screen now the speeds that were displayed over that particular survey. So in a nutshell, we go from 2009, where we had a higher speed limit, no speed humps, to 2021 with some calming measures in place for a number of years now. So people have got used to what they are. And overall, we've seen, again, average 7-kilometer-an-hour speed reduction between those 2009 and 2021 survey. So certainly a significant reduction in speed before and after those measures that we now have in place. Obviously, one of the questions we always have to ask ourselves is, do we have the right amount of lanes for vehicle traffic? And certainly Heatherway has 5 lanes, as currently is now. Again, the threshold we typically use for vehicle lanes to recommend going from 2 to 4, so 1 in each direction up to 2 per direction, is about 20,000 vehicles per day. It's a ballpark number we use. And so again, we did counts of traffic at the same time we did the speed surveys. And again, as you see up there, both the 2009 count as well as the recent count we did, the daily volumes are well below that 20,000 vehicle per day threshold. Again, something interesting, you'll see the 2009 count was about 4,200 vehicles, and then again, over the last couple of months, we're down to 2,800 vehicles. So we certainly have noticed, during the pandemic, a lot more people working at home, that both on Heatherway and other streets in St. John, the volumes have certainly reduced with people working from home, and you kind of see that in these statistics. So the long and short of it is, do we need 4 vehicle lanes for traffic and for vehicle traffic? And the answer is no, based on the statistics. Just moving over to MoveSJ quickly. So again, as I mentioned, we are in the 3rd and final phase of MoveSJ, which does include a cycling strategy. That cycling strategy is based on a few different premises, including the notion of focusing on connecting our neighborhoods to the central part of the city, kind of in line with Plan SJ. And so you'll see up on the screen, it doesn't quite show all the bike routes planned as part of MoveSJ, but you'll see the blue and green lines, especially on the east side of the city and the Milledgeville area and even the south end. Some of those planned streets that we intend to upgrade for dedicated cycling facilities. I have a red circle there showing Heatherway. So right now, as a draft is planned for the cycling strategy, there is no intention at this point of having bike infrastructure specifically for on Heatherway. Quickly, again, a couple other considerations as we talk. I guess, our new approach, or new to us, but certainly not new in terms of in the industry towards road safety. So we kind of take the 3 E's towards road safety. There's engineering, which is obviously my bailiwick around road design, traffic control, et cetera, to make our streets safer. Of course, enforcement for the second E. So our police force in terms of enforcing the rules of the road, whether it's speeding, running stop signs, et cetera. And the third E is education compliance of roadway users themselves. So again, it takes us as engineering, the police, as well as the community to keep our streets safer. So just a couple of questions, we can ask ourselves is, what if the posted speed limits were actually followed by more people? What would that do for us in terms of road safety? What if in all situations pedestrians had the right of way at crosswalks and those were honored by motorists? What would that do in terms of safety? And I guess the third question that goes more towards the cycling end is back in 2017, the New Brunswick followed in the heels of Nova Scotia and probably other provinces by enhancing safety in regulation for cyclists. So Ellen's Law was put in place back in 2017. Several rules in place that motorists and cyclists have to follow. A part of it is anytime a cyclist is on the roadway on the right-hand side, a motorist must give at least a meter buffer to cyclists. So again, we ask ourselves, if motorists obey those rules, the cyclists obey the rules of the road, can any street in St. John be safe for cyclists, no matter if there's infrastructure or not for them? Something to keep in mind. Again, quickly just on the life cycle and where we are with respect to Heatherway. So just in terms of roadway life cycle, and it can be the same for really anything in terms of infrastructure. So you start off obviously with the design and build of the original road. You move into your operations and maintenance, spot maintenance such as filling potholes, clearing snow in the wintertime, sidewalk panels that need to be replaced sometimes, underground infrastructure like water mains that sometimes break and you have to fix those as well. So those are spot maintenance and operational type items that happen throughout its life. Phase 4, especially around roadways, you move into some major maintenance. And that's where we are right now with respect to Heatherway is we tend in the city and many places to do a repaving of a street. So in our case and many others, you mill off a bit of the roadway surface and then you put a brand new layer of asphalt on top of that. What that does is it protects obviously the roadway itself, the sub-base below it, and the underground infrastructure. That's an important step in life cycle because it can cost anywhere from 4 to 5 times the cost to do a road reconstruction of a roadway compared to just doing these occasional major rehabilitative milling and overlays. So that's why St. John does it and other municipalities do it. And then the fifth phase obviously is reconstruction. And that's where kind of all the stars line up, where the roadway is about the end of its useful life. The sidewalks are in poor shape. The underground infrastructure, water, sewer, sanitary all need to be replaced. And so you basically reconstruct the entire roadway and usually the underground infrastructure along with that. So that really creates an opportunity to rethink, and the best opportunity to rethink a street because you really start with a blank slate where everything has to be ripped up anyway. Plus, obviously, with all the infrastructure reaching the end of its useful life, it just makes sense to rip it all up and start from scratch. So again, just where we are with respect to the life cycle of Heatherway, we're not at that reconstruction stage yet. We're at that major maintenance milestone where we're planning to do a rehabilitation or a repaving of the street. So with all that in mind, I kind of threw out 4 different options for discussion. I'll go through each of those options in a bit of detail, but just to get everybody thinking a bit as to what the possibilities are for Heatherway. So obviously the first option is status quo. Always need to consider that. So the current roadway cross section as it currently lasts. Step 2, option 2, which I'll talk about, is reducing from 5 lanes down to 3 lanes, potentially adding 2 buffered bike lanes, keeping the existing cross section of the roadway. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit more. Another option is, again, reducing from 5 lanes down to 3 vehicle lanes, adding 2 buffered bike lanes, but then also looking at narrowing the whole road itself. So in order to accomplish that, you'd be looking at replacing the sidewalk, center median, which has to be essentially moved over an entire lane, and a median on one side of the street as well as the sidewalk. And then option 4, which I'm throwing out there as an idea, is again, that original discussion we had back in 2009 or so, by completely closing one side of Heatherway and opening that up for active transportation. So only 2 lanes remain for vehicle traffic. The other side of the street, again, turn over to active transportation. So just quickly, some pros and cons of each of those 4 options. So in terms of the status quo, and again, you'll see up towards the right-hand corner the current cross-section of the street. I'll actually use that on the subsequent slides just to show the reference against status quo conditions. So keeping status quo, there are some pros to that. So obviously, if as a motorist you want to see high standard, you'll continue to have that. There's no hard infrastructure change costs required, which would be a good thing because, again, we're not at that reconstruction phase. There is some alignment with MoveSJ. Doesn't completely align in terms of that much roadway being provided to motorists, but at least it does align in terms of not dedicating any space to cycling infrastructure. And again, we do maintain that left turn lane into the different streets along Heatherway to gain access. Cons, again, no dedicated space at all for cyclists. So if you're interested in space for cyclists, it doesn't provide any of that. No further traffic calming that would be in place beyond what we have now, and no asphalt reduction. Option 2, moving towards this buffered bike lane approach. So again, you'll see at the top right-hand corner the status quo, and then below it the option 2 cross section. So again, moving from 5 vehicle lanes down to 3, providing that space over to cyclists instead as buffered bike lanes. Pros, again, not looking at any hard infrastructure change costs. We do again maintain that left turn lane for vehicle traffic as it needs to drive turn left in either direction along the street. Again, we gain that buffered bike lane, and it's still an acceptable level of service for motorized traffic. The cons, there's no asphalt reduction again with this approach. And again, we are providing that additional level of service for cyclists, but again, it's not considered as part of MoveSJ at this point. Option 3, bike lanes as well as road narrowing. So again, top right-hand corner, you see the status quo, and then below that, what we'll be considering, I guess, is a conceptual for this option 3. So again, in this case, you'd be narrowing the entire road up. So the pros of this, you would be looking at asphalt reduction, but in its place, you'd be looking at green space in its place. So you'd be saving on asphalt, but spending on installing as well as maintaining green space. Still maintain that left turn lane movement for vehicle traffic, and you'd be adding the buffered bike lanes. The cons, again, substantial hard infrastructure change costs required, again, ahead of this point of reconstruction. Again, by essentially pulling the entire road over by a lane, you have to rebuild the entire sidewalk on one side, grass median on one side, and again, you're essentially moving your entire median over if we were to reinstall that. And no great opportunities to sell that leftover green space. So again, with that cross section, you see some green space there. I did check with some experts in real estate, and again, between the houses that back onto Heatherway, as well as even the section that's undeveloped towards that southern end, there's no real great opportunities, we think, at this point to just sell it off and have it become somebody else's responsibility. And option 4, again, that option we discussed back in 2009 timeframe. So again, we'd be closing off 2 full vehicle lanes, providing essentially a wide path available for cyclists and potentially pedestrians as well. Pros here, again, asphalt reduction costs, but again, you'd be offsetting that with the green space and the path costs you'd have to install. Again, for cycling, an improved level of service over on-street because you'd be adding separated cycle space that's separated from vehicle traffic. The cons, again, you'd be losing that left-hand turning lanes in the connecting streets. Potential non-compliance with the Motor Vehicle Act. Again, we are discussing as part of MoveSJ to suggest changes to the Act to bring it to make some improvements to language. But potentially an issue with the Motor Vehicle Act as it currently stands, because cyclists would be traveling on the left-hand side of the roadway instead of on the right-hand side, and again, this whole definition of what a sidewalk really is, and whether or not cyclists can drive on that according to the act as it's currently written. So this is something to keep in mind. Again, hard infrastructure ahead of reconstruction that had to be invested in. Again, be replacing the asphalt with sidewalk and green space. You'd have those side street extensions. So again, if you close the entire side off, you still have to get those connecting streets on one side of the street out to the new 2 lanes that are left over for vehicle traffic. And we'd be losing the turning lane along the street, but we'd absolutely think we'd have to bring the 2 lanes at the 2 ends of Heatherway to connect on to Grandview and Hickey because of the increased traffic levels. So that would have to be constructed. The crossings that would have to happen between the path and the side streets, so it'd be offset a bit from the new intersections with Heatherway. And again, no great opportunities to sell any of that green space off to connecting property owners. This is just a quick detail under that option 4. Again, just showing the closure of those 2 lanes, plus potentially what it might look like towards the Grandview Avenue, and with opening it up essentially to 3 lanes of vehicle traffic, left turns and right turns, as well as, again, the single lane onto Heatherway from either direction. So brings us to the most important part of this discussion, which I want to turn it over to the group, is, again, that initial question I asked. With all that information in mind, what is it we want Heatherway to be? What is it we want it to accomplish for the community? And again, most importantly, which of those 4 options, or are there options that I haven't talked about so far that would allow the that purpose for Heatherway be met for the community? So with that, I'm going to bring it back at the end about how to go on from here. But at this point, I do want to open it up to people who want to provide feedback on it. I'm probably going to stop sharing my screen at this point as well. And certainly, if anybody has any input on those options, you're welcome at this point to raise your hand, and I'll turn the floor over to you. Let everybody go first. Good. Okay. Jill, good. I'll start with you. If you want to mute yourself.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Good, Jill. How are you doing?
Good. I just have a quick question. If you could clarify about, you did the traffic counts. I'm just curious if that traffic count talked about the different peak times, maybe, if it was just the count during the entire day or during that period of time, or if you looked at, if you know if it was busier, say, in the morning traffic versus the supper time traffic, or.
No, good question. We did, especially as part of that 2009 count, and of course I don't have it up in front of me now, but we did, I guess, hourly breakdowns of counts. And again, if it's anything like any street in St. John or other streets, you likely see that higher amount of traffic again during the morning rush hour, evening rush hour, and sometimes during the noon hour as well. So I don't have the data right up in front of me, but absolutely, it's very much likely the case that you will see that peak as people go to work in the morning and come home in the afternoon. But yeah, those counts that I show up there are 24-hour counts, so they're the counts for the entire day. If we do go to a particular option, we'll likely take a closer look at hourly counts and those peak counts and see what type of impacts would have to happen during those peak counts. But yeah, I don't have those right in front of me right now, but great question.
Okay.
Lori?
Hi there. Not so much a question, really, more just some feedback and quick thoughts. First of all, I'm happy to hear that, I guess I was coming into this thinking that maybe we're going to start introducing like transport trucks down into Heatherway, creating that traffic flow. So very excited to hear that this isn't what that is. but very intrigued to see what it could be. I have no preference. I'm fine with the way it is, but thinking about the possibility of adding a bike line, a bike lane, and just making that street a little bit safer. I think there's so many kids in this neighborhood, and yeah, making that space safer for them to cross over, and even creating additional space for them to use with their bike. So more just a comment that excited to see what this could be.
No, great, Lauren. Yeah, no, absolutely no intent as part of this design to encourage more truck traffic. In fact, this is not part of a designated truck route. And hopefully what we're starting to see, I mean, I know the 1 mile interchange was constructed a number of years ago, but certainly the intent of the interchange was to bring more traffic in the opposite direction, right, towards the 1 mile interchange and using Bayside Drive. So yeah, not part of a truck route, no intent to make it that way. And yeah. So no, thanks for your comments on that. So yeah, generally just general improvements potentially for safety for both pedestrians and cyclists is what you're interested in. Okay, thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
Great, thanks, Lori. Brad, you're up next.
Hi, Tim. So just a couple of questions here. I guess first off, have staff had the chance to do any sort of cost breakdown to determine how much each of these options would potentially cost?
Yeah, nothing in depth yet. The one thing I do have is what the cost of the resurfacing would be. So as an example, if we did not resurface one side of the street, that cost essentially for that one side would be about $220,000. So if we ended up not resurfacing that one side of the street, that would be essentially the cost saving in resurfacing. But no, at this point, again, just a discussion as to what the community's interest is in terms of preferential solution, and then we'd be doing a bit more on cost comparisons depending on what the will is. So that's a bit of a cost indication, but no, nothing in depth in terms of cost comparisons at this point, Brad.
Okay, perfect. And my other question, at this point, do we have any sort of time frame as to what the next steps will be after tonight's meeting and what that timeline will look like?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we are planning to go back to Common Council this year to report back on the results of this this project, as well as if there are going to be needing any changes to a resurfacing program as a result of any changes to this. So there will be something coming back to council on this project. Not an exact time frame, but I would say within the next month or two at this point, be bringing back something to council to have a discussion about, what the intent is for Heatherway, results of this session, and then what if there's any changes to that resurfacing plan for 2021. So probably in a couple of months.
All right, excellent. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brad. Nick.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the information. Always really interesting to see the numbers behind some of these streets. It's really helpful for this area, and even kind of comparing to streets that we think might be a little bit similar. Yeah, I guess the reason I came out tonight really was to see what the community is interested in, and of course it's a tough time of year to do that. Got a holiday tomorrow, and weather kind of cleared up, so I hope we hear more. But when you go out asking for feedback by email, because I think that's what is probably one of the most important factors going forward. Just when you're going through some of the pros and cons of some of these options, it's a good conversation starter, but I think it would be a mistake to see that as sort of the definitive pro con list to really evaluate this, because it just seems premature. Like I said, and I'm not like nitpicking or anything. I think we got to start the conversation somewhere, so it's a good way to start it. But I'm hoping that pro con list gets better defined as we get more feedback from the community, because I think we'll see some of those pros and cons maybe maybe change a bit. What I really like to see is a reimagining of that space. Some creative ways of using that space. You see uptown, they're having this competition on I think with Historica and Envision, and they have money towards it and everything. So it's nice if you have that kind of support. But there's those different kinds of grant programs that are out there to reimagine these kinds of spaces, and maybe we could look at something like that. Like ACOA has a competition open right now for a grant program for public spaces like this. And as much as I like bike lanes, I'd love to see a bike lane in that area. It would be cool to accomplish much more than just a bike lane. So that closing one side of the street option certainly opens up a lot more possibilities, a lot more creative opportunities to be explored. So anyway, just to sum that overall, I'd say let's not rush this. I know there is a resurfacing that's happening this year, but it isn't that reconstruction. Personally speaking, this is sort of I'm sure there's all kinds of problems with me saying this, but I would say just close it and see what happens. I think you would see people come out and play ball hockey on it. It would be interesting to see what the community does with it. If we just stopped it up. And as far as the infrastructure needed, I mean, we could use movable concrete barriers to do that are fairly low cost. It wouldn't be a sunk cost or anything. I'm sure those barriers could be repurposed somewhere else if once they've reached their end of use and we actually hit that reconstruction to make things permanent. But I think a pilot for this area would be kind of neat to explore. I know that the city has all kinds of financial constraints, but that might be what's needed to really invigorate the community and get them out here and reimagining how to repurpose the space and to get the attention of developers. I think right now the real estate market's on fire, and they're really focusing on areas near water and the uptown and stuff. But let's give them a reason to put a little bit of focus here on the east side and get people excited about it again. Because this could really hold some great potential if we have that opportunity to be creative. But if it's going to be a rushed process, like we got to make a decision because the asphalt's literally sitting in a truck and we can't let it cool down, then I feel like we could potentially make a mistake here. But anyway, thanks very much for hosting this tonight, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Oh, great. Thanks, Nick. Definitely there's no real need to rush this. The good thing with our asphalt resurfacing contract is there can be changes to it. So, it's not that we need to rush it. So yeah, we'll definitely take our time to make sure that we had consulted and did the crunching of analysis depending on what the best solution is, for sure. I kind of think along those same lines as you. I mean, we can do something simple as a short-term construction site where you block off that side of the street and just redirect traffic on the other two lanes. You can pretend as if it's a short-term construction job and see what happens. So that's certainly a possibility. So a good idea there. And certainly don't get me wrong. I have some pros and cons up and some options and ideas, but that's just to get the juices flowing and the discussion going. So certainly. This presentation, which will likely go back to council, will certainly, as it did for University Avenue, likely change between tonight and when it eventually goes to common council. So absolutely, and definitely hard night tonight, but we are going to open this up for feedback from anybody in the community as well.
Yeah, Tim, if I could just add to that too, actually, maybe one approach, the ideal, if this could happen, would be a street festival. I think the ideal way of doing that is if we had some community leaders, some folks that live in that area to lead that, but also have some support from community development, recreation, whoever it is at the city of St. John, so they're not doing it alone. But also not just putting it all on staff, because I know they have a ton of priorities going on right now, and it will just be a more successful event anyway if there are people from the community actually leading it. But I think that would bring out more people. It would literally bring people to the street. You close it down just like we did uptown with the Open Streets events last year, and see what ideas people come up with. I think that would be a great approach. But again, ideally, I think the best way to do that is people that actually live there. I live in the South End, so I'm not and I grew up on the west side, so I feel like there's like a unhidden code that I'm like not allowed to have friends on the east side or something. Anyway, like I think that would be a great opportunity or the ideal way to do it if there's actually like people that live there leading it, but then support from city staff, and that would be a cool idea if we could we get that chance in the future.
Great, thanks, Nick. Jill.
I just want to mention that I love the idea of piloting. I worry about what option we pilot. I will say that I feel personally option 4 is maybe a bit too reduced. There is some traffic, like, so I live off of Eagle, at the end of Eagle, and pretty much like there's always somebody there. I have to use the turning lane to turn down to Eagle. So I feel like the traffic could get pretty congested if we reduced it that far down. I have a question about what, so this is just my not aware of active transportation, but here's my question. What happens if you create bike lanes on Heatherway, but they have nothing to connect to on either end of Hickey and Grandview? Because Grandview is a very busy road, so where does everybody go after that?
No, it's a great point, Jill. And the city kind of did that for a while, to be honest with you, is we kind of picked streets that were easy to turn into bike lanes. And what we ended up with is a whole bunch of unconnected bike lanes that didn't go anywhere. So we really made a concerted effort. The first one being that Campus Harper connection, where we said, no, it doesn't matter if you're cycling or you're driving a car, you don't just go in a short block and that's it. So it's kind of started with the Campus Harper connection, where we said, no, we want to connect the south end to the Milledgeville area. And so we created a complete route from one part of the city to the other. Same thing with the Trans-Canada Trail through St. John. It goes west to east. And if you look at Move SJ, and maybe I'll share my screen really quick again just to show that. I'll bring that slide up. So you see all the blue and green lines. They're all connected and connected for a reason, so that again, as a cyclist, you can get from point A to point B. So yeah, that's part of the issue, part of the concern with Heatherway is we don't have anything that connects to it. So by rights, to make a connection, you'd have to connect those planned bike routes to get to Heatherway. So no, certainly consideration, and why we're a bit cautious towards installing bike lanes just on Heatherway. So good point there. Lori?
Just an idea on, Jill, you had a really good point on like where does this bike lane connect, because you do have like two hard stops at the other end, but there's if we connected it to the res, I know that I grew up in this space as well, and I live very close to Jill, but there is a connection point to the res, and I think that would be amazing if we were able to safely get to the res on our bikes. I think that would be great. Just another quick comment regarding the piloting. Also a big fan of piloting, but just I think it needs to be done at the right time. And of course you guys would think of that, but thinking about, turnaround times at the refinery, and traffic really increases at that point. So if that's the time that we decide to pilot, you're going to lose, I think, all of the support that you could potentially have once that's when all the traffic's backed up. And mindful of the timing, I guess, is my comment there.
No, great point, Lori, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and a great point about the res too. I never really thought about that, but that's something we'll take a closer look at, is if there was going to be a connection. Certainly that would be one of the closest, I guess, district parks for the city that would be ideal to be able to connect to. So I never really thought about that. So thanks for that. Nick, back to you.
Yeah, I guess two comments. This is great discussion. Great to hear this kind of feedback. So one on the idea of piloting something. That's why I think something like a street festival might be the best way to do that, because you probably pick a weekend, a Saturday or a Sunday when the traffic's a bit lower, and when people are available to do something like a barbecue or a street hockey tournament or whatever we could think of there. And then as far as connectivity, I would say have a look at the 2010 Trails and Bikeways strategy of the city. It was really ambitious, and as much as I really like Move SJ and some of the improvements that it's made and expansions that it's made, is a much more comprehensive strategy compared to the Trails and Bikeways strategy. It doesn't quite have the same ambition, and ambition, that's probably harsh to say. I mean, the reality is we just have limited financial resources. I think that's probably the reason in the city of St. John. So but if you do have a look at it, I mean, that will give you an idea of what at least was possible. It proposed connections from Heatherway to MBCC to Champlain Heights School through that undeveloped area, and as well as a connection to Little Res. The other thing that I really like about it is that it's linked to the city's subdivision bylaw. So once those undeveloped areas, like I said, behind Champlain Heights School and behind Little Res Park, once they're developed, we have a bylaw that actually requires the developers to set aside land for public purpose for the use of those trails, or to develop those trails. But I know also we've been getting away from that in the past few years, again, because of the limited resources for the burden of maintaining those trails in perpetuity in the future. But I mean, on the west side now, with that development that's being considered with the JDI Logistics Park, I mean, they have an agreement being discussed on different obligations of the developer, like putting in a park and they have to maintain it. You know, there's possibilities like that, and as much as I appreciate the city's financial constraints, it's a real shame that we don't get to do that, achieve that vision from 2010. But if you have a chance to look at it, look it up, the 2010 Trails and Bikeways strategy, the map within it, it gives you an idea what's possible.
No, great, Nick, and that's why I like having these conversations. You know, I kind of went into this discussion as if, you know, we need to do something permanent with respect to Heatherway, but I think between your comments and even, you know, Lori and Jill's caution around timing with some of the stuff, we can look at it completely different and say, okay, well, let's perhaps, again, just an idea, like maybe not we're considering too much of permanent change to the cross section of Heatherway, but just for certain periods of time, you know, such as a festival or something at the right times and maybe right day of the week, could be a temporary closure, like again, like you said, we could do in the uptown area. So it could be for traffic 95% of the time, and then close down at certain amount of time for different community events. So that's certainly something that I really thought of until a couple of you mentioned that. But yeah, and Nick, on your second point about, and I think Lori's too, about expanding out beyond Heatherway, you know, definitely think something we'll keep in mind for sure. But yeah, you're right, Nick. The 2010 Bike and Trails plan was quite, ambitious is the right word, and we tried to do with Move SJ is do something that's you know, we think is more achievable. But again, Move SJ can always change in the future. So great point there. Lori, I think you had your hand up. Did you still want to say something?
Nope. And my apologies if it is up.
Okay, no, maybe it was Jill then. I thought I saw a hand go up, but maybe not.
No, it wasn't me.
It was
Okay.
me. It was
Oh.
me, but I will just preface this with it's bedtime at my house, so you might hear somebody crying in the background.
That's okay.
So I put my hand down because it was loud. But anyway, I know, Tim, you're probably aware, I've talked about the playground on Boyaner before in our area. I'll just say I love Nick's enthusiasm for engagement. Engagement is difficult. Lori and I have both been trying to rally our neighbors a bit on what they'd like to see happen in the Boyaner playground, for example. And so I definitely agree if we are piloting something, maybe a letter out to the area to let them know that that's what's happening, because I'll be honest, I didn't see this opportunity for tonight until really, I think Lori mentioned it to me and I thought, oh yeah, I need to jump on that. So I'm not sure everybody is paying attention to the city's website if that was the way we communicated it. I'm not, and to be honest, I had we hosted the Green Machine at the Boy Inner Playground 2 weekends ago, and only a couple people from our crescent came out. We did a great job, but the community here not as engaged as you'd like. But I think people would be really happy with that. I think they would see any of those options other than the status quo as a benefit to the area for sure. So I wouldn't want to see this, like you've mentioned, this isn't going to be the only means of communication. So that's good. We have a Facebook group. There's an app for East St. John that everybody chats on. So I can share some stuff, some information there and spread it out that way. But yeah, I just wanted to share. It's not the easiest area to get out and about. So I don't know if what street festival might look like here.
No, great. Thanks, Jill. And it was actually kind of interesting with University Avenue and that we had a fairly good crowd on the call itself, but a lot of people became aware after the fact, and then kind of by word of mouth, I think, more than anything. And we got a lot more input as far part of the feedback at stjohn.ca emails being sent. So absolutely, this is probably going to be on our website. I think on Friday we'll have this discussion as well as the presentation itself. So absolutely, as soon as that's available on our website, share it out with all the contacts, and we'll have another week until July the 9th to be able to gain any feedback from emails. So yeah, spread the word for sure. Tonight's not the only opportunity. All right. Does anybody else have any last thoughts?
Hey, it's Nick. I just threw in the comments if there is any legs on a community-driven event or something, feel free to give me a shout. My email's in the comments there, and you mentioned a Facebook group. If you could throw the link to that in the comments too, that'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, like I said, this will be on our website. I think by Friday I'm going to have to give it to them on Friday morning, our communications department. But yeah, this presentation as well as the meeting itself will be posted likely on Friday sometime. So so watch out for the city website as well to link it. So what I've just shared now again is that final slide. Again, with the questions we're trying to ask ourselves. But also the very last line of this slide is, again, that email address, which again, anybody in the community, yourselves, your neighbors, whomever, can email by July 9th for any feedback beyond tonight. So yes, if people missed it, they're out enjoying the evening. There's still more than a week to give feedback before we close the feedback and then start to make some recommendations back to council as to how to proceed with Heatherway. So any final comments from anybody? Well, like it was a
Just
Jill,
thank
maybe?
you. Just thank you.
Thanks, Jill. And I appreciate very much everybody coming on for this call. Again, it's night before the holiday, so very much appreciate it. And I definitely learned quite a few things myself that I never thought of before this evening. So so thank you very much for that. Again, we posted this on Friday at some point, and be happy to hear your feedback and your neighbors and anybody else you'd like to push this out to. So with that, I'll just count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll end the call. And thank you very much for coming on.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Lori.
Bye.
And I'll mention you all by name. So thanks, Lori. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Brad, and thanks for coming on.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.